Hello everyone, this is Joshua Smith of Apollo's Artifacts. It is September the 13th, 2017. So today I'm going to have this recording as an address to Antifa. Everyone has seen the numerous problems generated by the Antifa movement this year. So it actually began last year in 2016, and it has continued apace. And what I would like to do is offer some advice and suggestions to members of Antifa and anyone who wants to join that group, some ideas about better ways to contribute to society rather than the approach of punch a Nazi and then identify, a quote-unquote Nazi as that which you do not like or what bothers your feelings or emotions. So we're going to look at a few different documents here. I'll try to provide those in links below this. I have some articles really interesting. The first one was from The Economist, okay? And the relationship to this that I want to establish here is that we have lots and lots of problems, obviously, in the United States. And among, the top of those would be unsolved homicides. I think that most people would agree that murder is probably, the worst thing that can happen to another person. Some people may say, rape or kidnapping or something like that, what have you. That isn't the point because the same principles actually apply to those as well. But citizens can actually get involved in this and attempt to help the police to solve these unsolved crimes, okay? So I think we should take a look at how many of these unsolved crimes there are, because just think about the good that you could do if you were to participate in this and help bring closure to a family who has lost someone in such a tragedy. It would be infinitely better than running up and punching a Nazi or whatever. The people who have lost family members to homicides really, really need this psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and so forth. And I think this Economist article can provide a pretty good context for what it is that I'm talking about. The article is titled "Getting Away with Murder. Police Fail to Make an Arrest in More Than a Third of the Nation's Killings." Article begins, "The manhunt lasted for more than 3 weeks. Some 1,300 heavily armed officers with dogs and night vision gear prowled the damp woods of upstate New York in search of 2 murderers who had escaped from a state maximum security prison on June 6th. The search is said to have cost around $1 million a day. At last, on June 28th, the drama ended. David Sweat, the younger fugitive, was shot and arrested 2 days after a federal agent killed his co-conspirator Richard Matt in the woods near the Canadian border. So these 2 killers at least are off the streets, but many more still roam the country with impunity. America's homicide clearance rate, the percentage of solved crimes that lead to arrest, has fallen considerably in the past 50 years, from around 90% in 1965 to around 64% in 2012, according to federal statistics. This means more than 211,000 homicides committed since 1980 remain unsolved. Every year introduces nearly 5,000 more. And I'll move from there to a document put out by the Pew Research Center, March 1st, 2017. "Most Violent and Property Crimes in the U.S. Go Unsolved," by John Gramlich. I've highlighted a few sections here that I'll read. "Only about half of the violent crimes and a third of the property crimes that occur in the United States each year are reported to police. And most of the crimes that are reported don't result in the arrest, charging, and prosecution of a suspect, according to government statistics. In 2015, the most recent year for which data are available, 47% of the violent crimes and 35% of the property crimes tracked by the Bureau of Justice Statistics were reported to police. Even when violent and property crimes are reported to police, they're often not solved, at least based on a measure known as the clearance rate. That's the share of cases each year that are closed or cleared through the arrest, charging, and referral of a suspect for prosecution. Now, of course, that doesn't mean conviction, because prosecution is a whole different level of it. In 2015, 46% of the violent crimes and 19% of the property crimes reported to police in the U.S. were cleared, according to FBI data. I have an interesting chart here It says that auto thefts are most likely to be reported, murders most likely to be solved. Motor vehicle theft has about a 69% rate of being reported. When you go down to the section on percentage of crimes actually cleared by police, you have 61.5% murders, but that also leaves 38.5% unsolved, unresolved as cold cases. And when we move down a little further in this document, it says, when it comes to deadly crimes, Chicago has drawn widespread attention for its historically low murder clearance rate in 2016, but murder is actually the crime that's most likely to be solved, at least when looking at national statistics. In 2015, 62% of murders and non-negligent homicides in the U.S. were cleared. That rate hasn't changed much since 1995, but it's far lower than in 1965, when more than 90% of murders in the U.S. were solved. And then I'll move from that to an interesting article that is from Channel 31 News in Denver, Colorado. It's titled, Help Solve a Murder. Public Website Has Searchable Data on Cold Cases by Annika Padilla. Can you help solve a murder or spot an undetected serial killer? Open source website Murder Accountability Project gives you the public free access to data about homicide cases from the federal, state, and local governments and the FBI. And there are a lot of them. More than 211,000 Americans have died in unsolved homicides since 1980, according to The Economist, the same article I was reading to you before, in 2015. The Murder Accountability Project is the most complete data on U.S. homicides available anywhere. The database includes two major FBI datasets, the Uniform Crime Report from 1965 to the present and the Supplementary Homicide Report from 1976 to the present. It also includes data on more than 22,000 homicides that were not reported to the Justice Department that researchers obtained using the Freedom of Information Act. Anyone can use the site to search for cases based on location, weapon, time frame, the victim's sex, age, and race. Of course, the sex, race, gender issue is going to get really complicated in the future, given the way that some of the laws are changing related to that lately. That will be interesting to see how that's handled in homicide cases. And I will skip over some of the more rather gory details that are provided in this article, which is a little bit surprising. It says that the Murder Accountability Project was founded in 2015 by Thomas Hargrove, a retired investigative journalist and former White House correspondent. Every year, at least 5,000 killers get away with murder, the website says. In the mid-1960s, police routinely reported clearing more than 80% of murders. Today, a department is doing well if it solves 65%, and dozens of major departments are solving less than half. So then you go over to the link for the Murder Accountability Project, and the top post they have here is from September the 4th. And it says, Map Study of America's, quote, missing murders. Coroners and medical examiners reported nearly 2,200 more homicides to state and federal health authorities in 2015 than police departments reported to the U.S. Justice Department, a long-standing discrepancy that has been getting worse in recent years. A new study by the nonprofit MAP, Murder Accountability Project, found significant lapses in police participation in the annual Uniform Crime Report, the UCR, a voluntary reporting program which policymakers rely upon as the official estimate for violent crimes in the United States. During the period 2000 through 2015, medical authorities reported 29,800 more homicides than were reported by the police. Now, of course, this could be a manipulative tactic that the police are using to artificially increase their clearance rate. I just state that as a possibility. I don't really know what is the true cause of the discrepancy. The MAP website also has a very interesting thing they call the serial killer algorithm, which is available, and it shows pockets or what it refers to as murder clusters in particular areas where it is suspected that there are a number of similarities between the cases, that they could actually be the horrendous work of a serial killer or even possibly a group of serial killers. And then the last resource that I'll take a look at here is actually a website. It looks like it is ran and maintained by Thomas Hargrove, called Project Cold Case. And he has a very good and clear breakdown of homicide clearance rates on a state-by-state basis. So you can figure out, what region you would be best suited to help out. You can look at the state. You can see the number of unsolved homicides in your state. And, hey, just pick one. Pick something that you can work on. Maybe you can... or you've shown the ability to organize already, so you can organize a group of your Antifa friends, and then you can go out and maybe, help the police to solve one of these. And the numbers here are just astronomical. I mean, they are in the thousands. Almost every state has hundreds that are unsolved. Many states have several thousand. Texas has 15,000. New York, 16,000. I mean, these numbers are just unbelievable. Michigan, over 11,000. Illinois, almost 9,000. Let's look at California. 33,456 for California. This is beyond belief. Those are figures tabulated from 1980 to 2008. So there's a lot of work out there for you. Lots of ways for you to contribute to society beyond, of course, get a job, have charitable donations, volunteer your time to work to help people, help the elderly. Do something like that rather than running around trashing campuses, setting things on fire, carrying around 2x4s with nails sticking out of the end, punching people in the face, and all this other nonsense that's going on. And don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying in any way that it's inappropriate to protest. Protest is good. It is healthy. But there's a peaceful way to do that. And there are lots of other options that, if you want to really use up all this pent-up energy that you have, then why don't you turn it against the murderers that are out there? Hunt them down. Find them. Help the police. Turn the information over so that the police can find these people. And this is not intended to lecture you all. This is just to offer advice, some suggestions, because I do actually have a growing suspicion that you all are being led down a primrose path to major repression. Because eventually, the police forces are going to get fed up with this sort of behavior and this sort of treatment, and out are going to come the batons, the tasers, the pepper spray right to your face. They're going to start beating you down, returning the sort of physical attacks that you have launched on others. The police are going to start doing that to you. They're going to take you down. They're going to lock you up, and then it's going to ruin the rest of your lives because you're going to be facing felony charges. Good luck getting a good job when you have multiple felonies on your record, okay? Use some common sense here. Because one of the things that I'm trying to head off is that I see that Milo Yiannopoulos and Steve Bannon and Ann Coulter are planning to speak at UC Berkeley. And I also see here that the police have been granted approval to go ahead and use pepper spray on you guys. So that could be a really, really dangerous event. Now, you could make it a peaceful one. You don't have to go listen to the speakers. You can stand outside. You can chant. You can do all this sort of stuff. But don't attack the attendees who go there. That does not help your case at all. It actually makes you look really, really bad to anybody who's on the fence about these issues, anybody who's an independent, anyone who's in between. Libertarians aren't going to like it. They want people to be allowed to speak, even if they say the most offensive things that you can imagine. So long as they're not actually calling for immediate threats of violence against anybody, you need to allow them to have free speech, period. And it looks like as of right now, the so-called Free Speech Week, when they hope to be there, is a 4-day event, September the 24th, I guess, through the 27th or something it says. But right now I'm actually dubious as to whether or not this is really going to take place or not. But one of the things that Milo mentions in this article, which is in SFgate, which was published actually yesterday, September the 12th, he says that he wants to put it to the test at UC Berkeley because he says they like to make a big deal that it's the home of free speech, but it's certainly the opposite of that. And he's correct. Lately it has been. And that is because the free speech movement on the left in the 1960s was two things that it decidedly is not anymore. Okay, one was that it was humanist. It tapped into the rational Enlightenment humanist tradition, and it was liberal in the classical sense of the term. Today, it is anti-humanist and illiberal, okay, which is completely contrary to the foundations of the Enlightenment process of rationality, reason, logic, and so on. And it has become that way primarily because of the postmodernist revolution within the academic institutions once the leftists got into control, basically following the 1960s. And during that time, they were able to topple certain metaphysical claims, certain epistemological claims, and once they toppled those, they then toppled ethical or moral claims. And metaphysics and epistemology are always the heart of any ethical claims. And what they did when they toppled these things, throwing over, empiricism, reason, logic, facts, evidence, it turned into a situation where they claim, for instance, that there is no such thing as a fact. There is no such thing as a fact which everybody can point to and rely upon, that there are so many modes of interpretations of facts that the facts themselves ultimately disappear. And this process began, first of all, about 500 years ago with the movements that ultimately decentered belief in God. Then the next thing, that was put into its place was the belief in man. Then the subject of man was decentered, and now we have the decentering of everything. And the protesters in the streets don't know this sort of stuff. That comes down through a slow process of filtration. The academics, a lot of them actually do know this sort of stuff, which is why they are primarily the ones who I hold most accountable, the ones most to blame for this sort of stuff. But it comes out through the university, gets interpreted by journalists, by writers and directors and producers in Hollywood, and then it results in the sorts of things that we see today where feelings are raised above facts. It's how a person feels that is the reality that matters most, and facts are something that is that are actually not objective, and they're used as ways to oppress and repress particular groups. And this comes out of something called subaltern studies and intersectional studies, post-colonial studies, and all of these are outgrowths of deconstructionism in philosophy, in literature, and postmodernist theory also in philosophy. But all of that is a little bit of a tangent for, the point that I'm trying to make today, which is there are better ways to contribute to society, help solve some of these unsolved crimes. There are lots and lots and lots of unsolved homicides, unsolved rapes, burglaries, assaults, physical attacks, and all this kind of stuff. And then you also don't have to participate in physical assaults on other people, which then ultimately end up possibly being unsolved as well. I mean, maybe you could solve your own assault cases and go in and take videos of yourself hitting people. I don't know about that part, but anyway, that's all I have for today. Thanks.